Hey, what's up? My name is Matt Workman, and welcome to This Week in Unreal. Now, I took a little break from social media just to clear my head and to kind of focus on a project that I can talk about a little bit in the future. But when I jump back in, wow, there has been some incredible things happening this week, and can't wait to talk about it. So first up is a podcast that I believe is 4.5 hours long with Tim Sweeney and Lex Fridman. So I've heard some mixed opinions about Lex Fridman and the podcast. I've heard of his podcast. I don't think I've ever watched an episode. Maybe I've seen clips from it. But whatever your political affiliations are or ideological, differences are with Lex himself, the podcast is a straight banger if you're an Unreal Engine user. Tim Sweeney is on it, so what else do I have to say? But it is 4.5 hours of probably the best overview and history of Epic Games creation to Unreal Engine, the first version. He calls up by name the programmers who created the first this is all well beyond my technical expertise, but they talk about the first time they got texture mapping to work. I think they were basing it on something John Carmack was doing at the time. This is Dune era and before me, Doom era. And what was really interesting to me from the tech point of view is when they started talking about lighting. Just Tim basically saying, he's like, oh, it would be really great if we had, volumetric lighting so that there was haze effects. And the answer to all of those problems where he went and programmed for 30 hours, he's like, oh, and then I wrote it. And I think they were writing an assembly at one point, in the early days, and then it transitioned to C++. And I don't know, it was cool to hear really technical, in-depth, step-by-step how Unreal Engine has come to exist. So I really enjoyed that. And then the thing that is going to be most important, I think, and the biggest takeaway for Unreal Engine users right now in this ecosystem is the vision of the future. Now, Tim is not afraid of throwing the M word at all, being Metaverse. And, there was a lot of money invested into games during kind of the COVID lockdown / Metaverse NFT Web3 era. And so people have either positive, extremely positive, they made a lot of money, or kind of oh, it's kind of scammy. We sort of have these two dynamics happening when the Metaverse word comes out, and it got kind of also co-opted when Facebook changed their name to Meta. So I had a company with the word Meta in it, and then all of a sudden I was like, ooh, I don't really like this too much. But maybe enough time has gone by that Meta isn't such a bad word, or Metaverse isn't such a bad word anymore. And Tim loves to use it, and it really does describe the goals of what Epic Games is trying to get done with UEFN, with Unreal Engine 6, and just the future vision for what's going on. So my main takeaways from this podcast were this vision of the metaverse, which again, sounds kind of ultimately cringy, but when you look at what he's trying to get done, he's been doing this before the word metaverse was really, really popular and in kind of the mainstream. And the cool thing that I see as a developer is this promise of what crypto gaming and Web3 gaming were promising, right? It was this interoperability of assets that you might buy a skin in Call of Duty, and then I can use it in Fortnite, or I can use it in World of Warcraft. That sounds insane. But he's talking about actually making that possible. And it doesn't have anything to do with blockchain or Web3 or anything like that. I think his stance on that's been pretty clear. It's that could be, that technology, the blockchain technology could be part of this if the government, regulates it and it gets kind of cleaned up a little bit. But he goes, as far to say that it's absolutely not necessary to have blockchain and crypto with these type of things. And I know from a game developer point of view, you may not be associating NFTs with this game skin interoperability, but a lot of gamers and mainstream people who follow this at all do. They're oh, that's a crypto thing, but it's really not. So I think it's cool to see that Tim is really looking at implementing the things that crypto Web3 gaming was talking about, but it is not, it's been completely decoupled from blockchain and whatnot. So I feel anytime I talk about that topic, this creeping feeling about oh, is this these NFT games, and they're not. So the future vision of I'll just say like Unreal Engine 6, something like that. Like that's something that's like somewhat tangible, not like the 20-year vision, which I'm sure they have, but say like the next 5 years, 10 years sort of vision is that games would be able to be written in sort of modular pieces and written by anyone really. So that instead of having like Xbox, PlayStation, or even siloed Unreal Engine games, is that if people kind of opt into this programming games this way, is that you'd have one virtual world, a game, but instead of that whole game ecosystem being like entirely published by like one game developer, each individual module, or like you could think of like island in one world that's all connected in real time, could be authored by multiple different game developers at once. And that's certainly not possible at all. And this requires like fundamental kind of upgrades to like the programming languages that we would have to write that in, which is like his project Verse, or Epic's project is Verse. And then also from like a networking point of view and like kind of like a kind of like web standards point of view, this just needs to get like, implemented by everyone evenly. And one of the main things that I think probably now in our like kind of limited view of like what this could be, I'm sure there's going to be way cooler things than this in the future. One of those main things is like, yeah, if everyone has, in a certain game mode, if people have like, pretty normal humanoid characters that aren't, have like 5 arms and, tails and like, things that are not normally human, skins purchased in one game, if everyone follows the same format rules, that those could then be used across like that entire ecosystem. So I see that, and that is really something that I would like. And I've had meetings with Epic, and I was like kind of conveyed something not as clear as that I would really love something like that, because I'm not trying to write web payments, which is relevant to the next news here. I'm not trying to write like really any net code or anything like that. I just want to make my specialty stuff, which happens to usually be like, live action cinematography kind of digital twins. That's what I end up building over and over again. So I would love to have my little Epic Games web shop, as this is now a word, in this kind of island where I just build camera equipment. And if I build skins for metahumans or just like, humanoid people, they're kind of like film industry skins, if that makes sense. So the more I see and hear about this, the less I'm interested in building like my whole own app and game, even though I know I'm going to have to do that for like, years and years and years. I would really hope that there's like some, metaverse world where like, oh, everyone kind of goes in there and I don't have to build the infrastructure and the input system. I just want to build like camera cars and camera rigs and build like mini systems within this bigger ecosystem. And a big part of this is then having the users, having stuff that I build being interoperable into other ecosystems. Like how many times do I have to build the camera in 3D and change the format and change what game engine I'm building it for and building an app around it? It would be great eventually to have kind of like one final ultimate thing I can build and it goes everywhere. I would love that. And as far as like getting the money right and like microtransactions, or really just having the money come from users, I would love for that to be handled as well, so that I don't have to build like my own system or anything like that. So that is my main takeaway from this podcast. Loved the history. I'm like a lighting person. I love lighting math and lighting tech. At a certain point, I check out and I can't follow it any further. I don't even know how to calculate quaternions for, decent matrix rotation math, but I enjoyed all of that. But what I really, really look forward to is this vision, and them being so open and making like kind of like really like big visible steps in like a very open way towards this. And I don't know any other company that makes it this clear, like what they're doing, and then seeing them actually make progress with it constantly. I think is awesome. So go check it out. I just did a 4.5 hour recap of this 4.5 hour podcast, but if that doesn't sell you on it, I don't know what will. I also wanted to shout out that yours truly does make a tiny appearance in the Lex Fridman podcast when they're talking about in-camera VFX and working in LED volumes. Anytime there's footage from that shoot, there is me in the darkness operating the camera. It's kind of hard to tell. You have to take my word for it, but that's me operating the camera. I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. Doing projects with Epic, it's always fun, and it was cool to have just a little bit of showing up, barely in this podcast, but there it is. So now moving to the humongous news that I thought this would never happen, because I went to, anyway, I'll talk about it. The lawsuit between Apple And Epic Games, I don't know what the state of the one with Google is right now, and like kind of Android. Well, it turns out that Epic won this lawsuit about the kind of the in-app purchases that happen. I'm gonna bungle this. Other people have recapped this much better, but to my understanding, my simple understanding of this was that Apple, when you have an app or a game and you have an in-app purchase of a digital good like a Fortnite skin, or for me, I don't really do this, but at the moment, but if I was like selling like, different camera packs or something like that, if this was an iOS, Apple would take 30% of that in-app purchase. And there's been a lot of companies who this has kind of like hurt them in a lot of ways, and they don't appreciate that, and it sort of really hurts their business. And the main thing that like why do you care? Why does a consumer care? Is that if you're buying a digital good on iOS, which is really convenient, I use like all iOS stuff, is that company likely needs to charge more for that product, so you end up paying more. That's sort of like, that's the negative side, like, for a consumer. And so I went to Unreal Fest Seattle, and the first talk after the keynote was with Tim Sweeney and a bunch of other like open app stores who have developers. I forget their names, but they had stores for like iOS and Android, or maybe not iOS, and I think maybe in Europe, because that had gotten opened up. And my takeaway from that talk, I was very sad coming away from that talk. Tim said that they had basically lost that the judge ruled that like nothing, like that the Apple was supposed to like kind of loosen the rules on the in-app purchases and taxing the 30% on that, but that they had lost, that Epic could not sue them again for that. They couldn't keep pursuing that, and that Epic had basically lost that battle. And this was like a couple months ago, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's unfortunate news. Like, how is the metaverse possible without being able to have the iOS ecosystem opened up? So I was like kind of sad, but like still like this is a battle bigger than anything that I can understand or really take part in. So that was my takeaway from the whole thing. I was like, oh, Apple versus Epic, like Apple won like outright, like no question, in the US, not in Europe. In Europe, they won pretty much. So after I watched the Lex Fridman podcast, I was like, okay, wow. There's this news that Epic won. And I was like, how is this happening like right after the Lex podcast? Like this is absolutely crazy. And I thought for sure, because I heard it from Tim himself, that this wasn't possible. They lost. You don't just like win. And so I don't know the law around this kind of stuff, but apparently, again, in my basic understanding of it, is that the judge ordered Apple to kind of, loosen the rules, or like around like the 30% fee. And then they did like nothing. They like, it seemed like it was like offensively bad how much they didn't follow this. And I guess if you do that, the judge, I don't know, again, I don't know the law. I guess because of this, the judge like reopened it or did something, and now basically Epic has won. They're like, you know what, like you messed up, and now you know what, now you literally cannot do this 30% fee. So a super scuffed legal version of my understanding of it, but this is like an insane surprise to me, because like I said, I literally heard Tim Sweeney say that they lost, that Epic can no longer pursue this lawsuit, this free Fortnite movement that they started, that they basically lost it. And then all out of nowhere, though I think a lot of companies knew that this was happening, I think Epic had some idea that this was happening, out of nowhere, they win. And now Fortnite's coming back to iOS in the US. Crazy. I tweeted at Tim, and I was like, or maybe, I don't know if I added Tim or not, but whatever. I was like, oh, does this mean UEFN maps in the US are going to be playable on my iPhone? Because they never have been. I've never played a UEFN map on my iPhone. I live in the US. And Tim Sweeney wrote back that, yeah, that's going to be possible. I was like, that makes UEFN for me like really, 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 really compelling. I mean, the whole idea of having a game that I build for Windows, then works on macOS, works on iOS. I know kind of big companies can pull that off, but for me, it's really hard to get them all working together. To make one U project that works for all of those, and you get everything working and all the inputs. It is a tall order for a solo, I must say. So UEFN, would allow for that. Obviously that's like what it does. I'm kind of waiting for UE6, I think, but just absolutely out of nowhere incredible. But it does seem like Epic and Stripe and all these other companies and Spotify that were also getting, charged like 30%, and Patreon 30% for their in-app purchases, for their digital subscriptions and stuff like that. They all had builds ready. So they must have kind of known, because like immediately after this happened, Spotify has a new thing so that you can pay on their website instead of in the Apple app like you had to do it before. Stripe's doing it in the US. And Epic immediately released this press release that I'm still wrapping my head around. I mean, this whole thing is kind of like, well, I had told myself this wasn't possible. But they released this kind of a news blip, changing a little bit of the rules around the, basically like the revenue system around games that you publish to the Epic Game Store. And then the new thing for me, which I still don't really understand, I saw some other people trying to understand exactly what this is, are the Epic Game Store web shops. And this clearly has something to do with in-app purchases. I think they're calling them out-of-app purchases. There's something that you can get your own Epic Games web shop, which someone's going to need to explain that to me. But again, huge win. That's all there is to take away from it. Huge win for Epic, huge win for Tim and the whole legal team. I can't imagine how stressful this must have been fighting this. And then to get this win, which seems like out of nowhere, must be like absolutely incredible. So with all of this, what do Unreal Engine developers like myself and like you possibly, what do we care about this? How does this really affect us? I think that if you're developing with Unreal Engine, that the company that makes it, them being able to get what they want is good. That's all I take away from it. I was like, this is clearly very, very, very important to them, and them having won this, now their focus gets to go back onto stuff that is even more directly affecting like what I'm working on. So I look at this and I am interested in, I've always been interested in iOS. It's always been like kind of clunky or kind of hard, I thought, to publish to the App Store. I've done a little bit of testing with TestFlight and whatnot, but I'm very interested now at looking at Epic Game Store for iOS and what that looks like and what these web shops are, and being able to do things that are native to Unreal Engine, native to Epic Game Store, and their whole platform, Epic Games Services, and Epic Games payments, to be honest. I've always thought implementing Steam Workshop and Steam things in Unreal Engine games felt clunky. I know you can do it, lots of people do it, but I was just never really, even Steam achievements, I've felt kind of those are kind of fine. I've never really implemented them. I'm just kind of simple as an Unreal Engine developer. So I'm even more now incentivized to think about building the next kind of wave of apps and things that I'm building, about publishing them on the Epic Games Store, especially now that it's iOS, which I've been kind of waiting for. And there's things about 5.6 that I've heard. I forget what I'm allowed to say, but things about iOS, in 5.6 and with this new Epic Games Store web shops and whatnot, I'm really interested to see what is built in natively for Epic Games Store services, web shops, and publishing to iOS. So for developers that are looking at, kind of distribution and then also what subsystems you want to start implementing, this is now becoming the kind of the full package now. And now that they're kind of unleashed on the iOS store, I think there's probably some bigger plans that we're going to see coming out. So it's hard to top Epic Games winning against Apple and the Lex Fridman podcast, but something that came out that is awesome for gamers and then is probably the most positive game announcement I've seen this year, surely, we'll just say that much, is the Elder Scrolls 4 remake. Oblivion. I played this game. I'm an Xbox 360 user, or I was back then. I had the Red Ring of Death. I had a 360. I played that. I didn't have a what was it, 3 at the time? I had a PS4 after that. But before that, I was all Xbox. And I played Oblivion. And it's been a long time. But once I saw this trailer, I was like, oh, I know this game. Like, this is like formative gaming years for me. You know, it's like this is up there with like, not timeline wise, but this is up there with like Zelda Ocarina of Time and just like the first Super Mario 3D game ever. Like Oblivion is one of those games for me. I was like, wow, this is like what's possible in games. like it's so like in StarCraft 2 and StarCraft 1, it's like part of my like, you know, my upbringing is like as a person. Oblivion is one of these games for me. And so we probably all know the story at this point, but if you don't know, they dropped this like 20-minute trailer. And at the end of it, they were like, yep, instead of like a coming soon date at the end, they were like, this game is available today, which that is very rare from any game developer to drop such a such a crazy announcement, to shadow drop a game. I don't know of a game that's been shadow dropped. I don't think I've ever played a game that's been shadow dropped that didn't have like pre-marketing for it. And like the only reason that's probably possible is because everyone who plays RPG games is like, I know what Oblivion is. Like, what? Like, I'll play that today. And everyone did. The whole internet played it that day. It's like, you know, single player game that's already been solved. Everyone knows everything that's going to happen in it. But just the whole internet loves it. And this game came out and it's you know, it is like, certainly a special event that happened. And what makes it even more special for Unreal Engine users is that the studio that handled like the visual overhaul for it uses Unreal Engine 5. So this is an Unreal Engine 5 game. So for me, I was like, wow, this is a double whammy. Bought it immediately on Steam, started playing through it, and it's just awesome to see the Unreal Engine 5 has really penetrated this far into like the games market, the AAA, AA. This is a AAA, right? I mean, even though it's like an older game, it's still like a AAA. It's not like a flagship like Elder Scrolls 6 one because it's a remaster, but still, that studios this big are like shipping games with Unreal Engine 5 is cool to see. Because when it first came out, obviously no one was shipping with it, and it was like, oh, it's going to be years before people can actually ship games with UE5 because, you know, you have to update to it and then make that whole game, which takes years. But now we're in it. We're in the thick of it. Unreal Engine 5 games are just dropping back to back. This one's awesome. And if you watch the announcement trailer, when I was watching it, I was like, Virtuos is the studio, I believe, that was handling the visual remaster. I was like, that looks a lot like UE5, the interface and the behind the scenes. And I was like, that is definitely UE5. And then they said it, this is being remade with UE5. And me, the big MetaHuman fan, as soon as that happens, I'm like, well, are they using MetaHumans? And they are definitely using MetaHumans. It didn't get said anywhere. I haven't seen that published. But there's a couple people, virtual people, in that trailer. And when I play the game, I was like, that is a MetaHuman. Now, to be fair, I think Bethesda uses, I don't think they've talked about it yet. I think they have their own kind of text to lip sync plugin system workflow of their own, because it didn't look like ARKit, and like that would probably be too much animation data to have animations of all the lines that are in Oblivion. So to me, it looks like they're using some sort of like, you know, custom text to making the mouth move system. So when you see some of the metahumans, their mouths don't move like a normal metahuman because there's a lot of bones in a metahuman face. There's a lot of morph targets. So it looks like they have sort of like, they use like the metahuman head, I think, and then did their own like face animation system, which is blasphemy to not use the 3-lateral one. But, you know, there's so many characters and they have their own kind of Bethesda-y way of doing it. That's my take. I don't know for sure. And while I can't confirm 100%, I have organized and downloaded every single metahuman groom multiple times, organized them, made character creators with them, and I know a metahuman groom when I see it. So these aren't the strand grooms that are hyper detailed. These are the card hair grooms. When I'm playing that game, all I'm seeing is metahuman grooms over and over again, the ones that, you know, the Epic has made. So it's pretty funny to notice them. They are, I think they're certainly have been like, you know, reduced. They're simplified versions of it, but there's no doubt in my mind that these are, you know, the actual metahuman grooms. They've just been kind of like optimized and made, you know, performant enough to have like this many on screen at the same time. So Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remake, made in UE5, shadow dropped using hella metahuman assets. that's a banger for me. Moving on to a couple notable tutorials that I found. This got linked to me from LinkedIn. I saw this. It's called Creating a Content-Only Plugin, and it's on the developer forum of the Epic Games website. And this to me is something that I still haven't watched, and I wrote back on LinkedIn. I was like, I need to do this. And to basically summarize, I make a bunch of different games in UE5 now. I make Cinetracer 2, I make CamOp Simulator, and I'm in the middle of starting a new project as well. But the thing is about all of these projects is that they share the same content. Everything that I make in Maya, from camera rigs to control rigs to textures, they're all the same throughout all of these UE5 projects, right? Let's make logical. And same with UEFN. And what I end up doing is migrating like my dollies, my cranes, my cameras between all the projects, and they sort of get desynced. It's like, oh, Cinetracer 2 has this camera, but then I updated it for this one, and then this one has like another version of it. So my versioning is like just all over the place because I'm just migrating the stuff as I make it. So what a content-only plugin could do, I think, this is like what I sort of see in it, why I was interested in it, was that I would put all of my like camera cinematography Unreal Engine 5 content, the rigs, the models, the meshes, the materials, just all preset up in one content plugin, and then use that plugin in multiple projects. So that when I update that plugin, all the projects get the same assets. Now, it's likely wouldn't be the same blueprints with the logic and how they move and stuff like that. That's very custom to each project, but at least the meshes, some of the control rigs, but definitely the materials and textures, just like the artwork. I had to basically have like a cinematography database plugin that would have all of my cameras and rigs and like just like the hundreds and hundreds of like, movie assets I basically made for Unreal Engine 5. Having that in one place that keeps them in sync between all of my projects, that sounds really good. And again, it's probably not until you have multiple projects that share assets, obviously, that you would need to do this. But I'm literally in that situation right now. So I thought this was something that was relevant to me and might be relevant to you if you're in a similar situation. And the second kind of tutorial that I wanted to point out is on Material Designer in Unreal Engine 5.5. I believe this is part of the kind of like motion graphics suite, perhaps. And it's made by Nick Justitian, who I know from IRL, where he works at Drexel. He teaches virtual production and motion capture at Drexel University. But he also has a YouTube channel that I follow constantly when I need to like remember how do we retarget metahumans again, and I watch his content. He has a new channel dedicated to motion graphics, which is like a big new thing that's really cool. And I've wanted to use motion graphics from UE5 for this show. So once I get my things together, maybe I can pull that off. Anyway, he has a new YouTube channel dedicated to Unreal Engine 5 motion graphics. And I thought if you're interested in that, like I am, that you should check that out. So moving on to what I'm working on this week or this month is a camera building simulator, another simulator. I was building a grip truck simulator. I build a lot of simulation things in Unreal Engine 5 around the film industry. That is sort of my specialty. It's what I like to do. And so I was looking at the Industria 2 kind of inventory system that's like really detailed and realistic and using all the UE5, bells and whistles to look realistic. And I was like, I have to make something like this for cameras. I think that that's going to be, it's the right time technology-wise. Computers are like just fast enough if you have like a pretty high-end gaming computer. And UE5 is looking really, really good with reflections and of course lumen and whatnot. So I spent a good week or two remaking all of my camera equipment. It's basically an Alexa 35 as detailed as I wanted it to be, as I've always wanted it to be. So every button is a model, the door opens on the camera, the peel mount spins, like everything that you could basically interact with and mechanically move in real life, I want that to be possible in the virtual version. And then the whole game is just at a desk and you're just looking right at the camera and you're spinning it and you're attaching pieces, and then you build a realistic camera like you would in the real world. That's sort of my vision for it. It's something I've always wanted to build for Cinetracer and for the systems that I've been building out, but it never really made sense to spend like, honestly, this might be like 6 months building cameras that detailed. That wouldn't have been as valuable to people back in Cinetracer 1 and when I was building early stuff, it's just not worth it. It doesn't help anybody. But if the entire simulation now is based on let's build realistic rigs and try out different combinations of things and just kind of see how it looks, and it's also kind of fun, I hope, that now, one, I've sort of leveled up to the point where I can model this stuff, because that's a challenging part. Rig it in Unreal Engine 5, another challenging part, and then build an interaction system for it. I think I sort of have all those things kind of leveled up to the point where like I think I can actually execute this. So that's what I've been building. And the feedback on Instagram and whatnot has been pretty good. I sort of know I have something when people start DMing me like, where do I buy this? Like, how do I get this? Like, is the demo available? You know, can I be in the beta? So I'm interested in it. I think it's like kind of a good time, technology time wise, to get into building something like super, super realistic. I think that's going to be really cool to push Unreal Engine 5 to be able to do that. And then I know for sure people have already been asking me to like be part of the closed beta, etc. So should be a fun project. And things that I learned from it and the assets, if I put them in a content plugin, these can all come to like all the other projects I'm working on as well. So that wraps it up for this week in Unreal Engine. What a banger. I don't think you could ever top this news-wise. I mean, this is like just win, triple win, all the wins like all at once, like absolutely incredible. And the last thing I wanted to say is that Unreal Fest Orlando is happening. I am planning to be there. Should be a very good time. I have not regretted any of the Unreal Fest I've gone to. They do cost money. They cost time, of course. Made a whole video about it. But they're a great time, and the most important part is just networking with people there. Or if you don't want to think about it that way, just hanging out with people that like Unreal Engine. I think that's the same thing to me. So check out those dates. If you're on the fence about Unreal Fest Orlando, this is just one little push to go check it out. And I will see you on the next one.